because I'll share the story of how I ended up at the museum. But what I've learned in the 3 years that I have spent a great deal of my time and my life there is that it's not really just about Walter and his wife Leo who preserved the legacy. It's about you. And it's about your journey. And the inspiration that Karen and I will be sharing here tonight is to ignite and offer you an opportunity to really step into what is still beckoning to you. So this is my first time at Tesla Tech. In my regular paying job, I've had the privilege now to train or coach over 50,000 leaders from 33 countries spanning 24 industries. That means that I'm a little more seasoned than some. Steve can take that word from when he was talking about today. And it is such an honor to be in a room of people who care so much about changing the future of humanity. And I just want you to know I felt that since I walked in yesterday. This is my very first Tesla Tech conference, and I honor you about that. So as you go through this, please remember it's about your journey, and to simply relax into it, and don't try to capture it all. It is a lot in a short amount of time.
So this journey is also, you're witnessing the unified field of our reality. So as we go through, there are certain things I want you to just kind of imprint in your brain, is the idea of the number 3, the idea of the prism, and the idea of the triangle. So you'll see these things continually repeat. And so with that, we'll continue. And so those are just things you'll see how they all thread together. So every 7 years, Walter Russell had an illumination on his birthday. And so the first illumination was 39 days. And when he did it, he came up with the universal one. And the idea is when he went through what he calls going to God, he went through the 9 gates of colors, the 9 gates of frequencies, the 9 gates of crystalline structure. And this is where he came back with the universal one. And so we're going to take you into a journey a little bit into what those 9 gates mean, that he came back and gave us what he calls the wisdom of the science of God, where he didn't think we were going to make it any better until we actually understood the science. So we're kind of giving you the science of our nature and our reality based from his journey.
And I'm sure there'll be some additional questions. I do want to point out 2 important people in the audience that are with us. We have Margaret Rue, who is a board member of the University of Science and Philosophy. Raise your hand, Margaret. She actually had a chance to live with Leo Russell, Walter's wife, for 10 years, 50-year-plus student, so she is a tremendous resource here at this particular conference. I also want to introduce Ken Pearson in the red. He is a 30-year student of the Russell work and is came to the museum with a dream in his heart to someday do a documentary and a movie about Walter Russell's life.
So when we start looking at Walter Russell's work and we look at the electromagnetic, so for him it was more about magnetics and then electric. But when you start to see the visuals that go along with this, you'll see that all of those electrical wheels, that's okay, you can go next one. You can see that there are systems within systems. So within these octaves that he has as compressed light, you will see that this fields, we are fields within fields. So the universe has its field, which is a magnetic field. The earth has a magnetic field. You have a magnetic field, but your heart has a magnetic field that's 5,000 times bigger than even your brain. And then if you look at Eastern traditions, you look at the wheels of light that are the chakras within you, that are all points that are lined up with your vagus nerve. And it's all about systems within systems.
And this is important because how I became interested in the Walter Russell work is because my expertise is in systems thinking. I was trained by Dr. Peter Singhi and his team at MIT when I was in my 20s, and I never knew any other way to see the world. So I have been teaching this to leaders across the world ever since. And I've always had a big burning question in my heart, and that is how can we begin to influence and leverage the systems that are out there? How do we influence and change the way leaders think? And so when I walked into this museum and saw some of the work, and we're going to show you a particular illustration, all of a sudden I saw something that I actually knew was in existence for my entire life since I was a little girl, and I had never had an idea of who else had seen this here. So note how the threads of light are connected. This is a very, very powerful illustration from Walter Russell. After his 39-day illumination, he spent all of these years trying to figure out and articulate and bring to life what it is that he saw. So from someone who had never heard of this, so here I'd been searching for this. What's really important to understand and we have this at a booth in the other room, is when I walked in, this was the very first illustration that I saw. This is called God is Light poster. And on the bottom here, it actually showed the threads of light between people. And that stopped me in my tracks, because I had seen those threads of light for my entire life. And in fact, in my 20s, my very first job as a leader was asking me if I could take on the job to try to share with the community that we're all in this together, that we are all one, that what happens on one side of the community affects the other. He was like, do you think you understand that? And I explained to him how I see the lights between people, and he looked at me like many of you might have one time looked at me and said, oh, well, that's nice, without any real understanding. So what's very interesting about the work of Walter Russell is that for some of you, you've had a deep understanding and knowing of many of these things, and his scientific drawings actually help bring that to life.
So when you look at Walter Russell's drawings, we don't always look at things dimensionally. So I want you to look at the one that says 1, and that's like the vortex like of a tornado going down. And then you see once you see the tornado going down, then you see the magnetic field spinning around it. And when the lights spin, you see the spinning of energy being collected. And when the particles go together, they come and they actually birth light. So when I looked at this, when I was at the Electric Universe a long time ago, covering that, there was a guy named Kung Pop, which kind of said to me, again, just like Michael Claridge and I had the magazine, you can see the layers. So if you look at that, you will see Walter Russell's periodic table laid across that. And as it spins, you'll see the micro to the macro going through. But you'll also see on the bottom is a picture that Richard Merrick did for interference theory. And it shows the magnetic field in the golden ratio. And you'll see that that actually is a golden ratio. Your ear is a golden ratio. So we're really designed as a sound system. So this system keeps going with the next one. And when you see the system and things are evolving, there's the next part where you see is in this system, it is weaving. So another way for us to really look at this is that these are the planets moving that you see, and in it, it creates geometry. And that geometry creates your life biogeometry. And that doesn't just happen on the cosmic scale. That picture on the bottom, was your DNA. So that DNA at the bottom does the same thing. We tend to look at things very one-dimensionally, and I want you to look at it from the way you can look at it three-dimensionally. So you're looking at it from linear to top-down. So you can see that it actually creates a weave. And so we're all interconnected in this weave. It happens from the micro to the macro.
And part of what appealed to me when I first found the Russell work, how any of you ever put together a puzzle, and it helps to see the picture that's on the front of the box. Would you agree? And then the first thing you do typically with a puzzle is you like to do the outer edges so that you have some idea of where the rest of the puzzle pieces fit. Fair enough? Instead of just having no picture and no border. Well, what happens for me, and what I hear from many people with the work of Walter and Leah Russell, is the fact that it gives you a border for the cosmic puzzle that so many of us have many different puzzle pieces too. And Karen has done a lovely job of bringing some of these elements to life.
Yeah, just looking at the particles moving down there, you see that everything is nothing but particles. So, yeah, and from there, when you look at it as a puzzle, you can hold this for a second. When you look at this as a puzzle, what you see is this field, and within that field, it's a geometry, which then creates the holographic field, which creates the algorithms. And so this is where you can see that when we're looking at the matrix of holographic light, that this is a matrix of light that's always moving in like a gyroscopic sense, recreating algorithms. You can go to the next one. And the person's work that reminds me of the most of showing you numbers, which is where I know Mr. Greg Volk over there, is Walter Russell's work. So Walter Russell's work actually shows the tiles, and those tiles too are mirrored lenses, just like Walter Russell's are. But the interesting thing, how I met Mark, we called and said, can I be in the magazine that you do? And I said, yes, but I'm doing one on domes or numbers. He said, I'd rather be on domes. The picture behind his puzzle is the Taj Mahal. And when I saw that, I was doing domes, and I thought, oh my goodness, there is nothing new under the sun. They already knew it. And so when you see these numbers and these complexes and you go into these dome structures, you just know that you're walking into a field that they've known for a long time. And that's
When you look at all these moving pictures here, I love the way Karen actually brought some of these to light. And so know when you go back and look at the video, it takes some time to actually go through this and see that you're actually seeing this work all over the place, and it actually makes our existence more magical.
Yeah, and so the whole idea of the field, then you can imagine that what you're doing is in this, you're walking in the field. You're literally walking in the hologram. And just like John over here is playing with this Rubik's Cube, the living universe is something where every move we make is calculated. It's a way of thinking about it. But it is a superfluid crystalline matrix and a quantum field. So it's not amazing that that's actually how we play? And we need to become conscious of what we're doing at any given moment in time, because we're playing with the puzzle. So.
Now, when I entered the museum and I went through the scientific room, and I want to invite you all to Waynesboro, Virginia. It's a little off the beaten path. You can fly into DCA, which is 2 hours away. You can fly into Charlottesville or Richmond, which is somewhere between 30 minutes and 1 hour away. It's worth the visit. You will see the unbelievable artwork that this man has painted and sculpted. And then you will see this additional body of work. And so when he went through his illumination, so imagine this was someone who I had never heard of Walter Russell at all. Never. And I went to that area because I was going to visit a tachyon healing chamber, because like many of you, I wanted to find out what were the new healing modalities. And I always suspended any disbelief I had. And so the only one was 6 hours away from me in this tiny town I've never heard of, Waynesboro, Virginia. So I take my 6 hours, I drive there, and I do a week of sessions. And he hands me this brochure and says, in between sessions, why don't you go check out this museum? And I was like, who is Walter Russell? And he says, you'll see when you get there. So I walk in and I see this magnificent, breathtaking body of work. I don't know how to articulate to you all the treasure that's there. And so while many of them have been 50-year students and 30-year students and even 13-year students, I was new walking in there. And the profound impact, it changed me. And so when you're looking through all of this, and we have the information in the other room, if you haven't tap danced into this, see what it's about to call to your heart. I went back 5 months later after I left with all of these things, these materials. And I spent 5 months consumed going through the home study course and so many of the materials, and I knew there was something special. I had been searching all over the world for someone who would put some of these things together. And I came back and I offered to sponsor programs and bring people in from all over the world to figure out how we could start to make this very complex and powerful work more palpable to the average everyday person. And so one of the programs is actually how Karen and I met. I saw that she did an incredible job of taking Walter Russell's work and placing it into a visual journey. And so I invited her, and thus our partnership was born. This is one of the most magnificent paintings there in the room. And so imagine you come out of this illumination. So imagine yourself, place yourself in your own illumination. All of a sudden, you go through a time where you feel yourself suspended from your body and you are connected to the light, and however it is that you call it, he called it the Creator, and comes back and is trying to paint and figure out how to articulate. How do I sketch out the beauty and the magnificence of what I saw? And so this wave, this particular wave painting is actually in their centerpiece in the museum, and very, very powerful. And you can actually order any of these scientific drawings, by the way, at the philosophy.org website.
Yeah. And my job was to kind of give you an idea of the motion of how it actually moves, because I think, to me, if you just see it static, sometimes you don't get the full picture. So I would say this would be also the top-down.
This is a very powerful and sometimes misunderstood illustration. Have any of you seen this particular illustration from the Universal One, the Cosmic Clock? I have just a few people in here. It's incredibly powerful. We have one over here at our booth, and it was recently under the leadership of John Bonsall, the previous president of the University of Science and Philosophy. He found in the archives where Walter himself had named this instead the Grand Symphony of Creation. That was very powerful. And so he brought that to the public. And so please understand that much of Walter's work, once he passed away, and then later Leo passed away and refolded is what they call it, because they believe you can never die, is this all went into storage. They stayed open for 10 years. And after that, all of this treasure was in storage for 20 years. 20 years. And the people who knew of the work were almost heartbroken over what they saw. And so a mighty group of volunteers came back together, opened it back up in 2019, only to have COVID shut it down just a few months later. And so we have been this small organization trying to be sure that we stay open, because this indeed is a treasure, and there's quite a bit of powerful learning from this grand symphony of creation.
So this one is when you look at the symphony, Walter Russell was everything is light. So all matter is crystalline, all matter is frozen light. And this is to show you his stuff in the back. His idea is one universe, one mind, one force, one substance. And when you look at the glass breaking and going through, you kind of see it. This picture for me kind of showed that it's just nothing but particles in waves. This is in the universe. It creates literally everything. And this substance is you. You are light, you are one with the force, and it is within you. And so as Albert Einstein said, matter is energy, energy is light, and that's what we are. But that's a way, there's certain things that when you look at scriptures or different things, so how can it all be one? And so as I did my own book, what came to me is what makes matter. And I was working with Dr. Gerald Pollack at the time, helping him with some of his conference and promoting. And he said, Karen, it's all particles, light, and water. And when I went to Wikipedia, which could be wrong, but it looked like it, the only difference between any of it was the density of the particles. And when you think of that, you go, oh my goodness. So Walter Russell basically says, divided into many substances known as elements of matter. So all it is those particles dancing, rearranging, informing you, and informing you just by the way they cluster. And so, yeah, I think that when you look at this, you go, wow, it is one. It is one. It's just rearranging itself in multiple ways. And this is where I call it the recycling system. This is nature's way of moving energy. And do you actually really ever die, or do you just recycle from liquid, solids, and gases? And that made sense to me, So
just an interesting nugget for those of you that don't know the story. When Walter Russell spent 5 years, this was a man with a 4th grade education, that when this experience happened to him, he spent 5 years figuring out, how do I share this with the scientific community? This was a really big deal. And so then he sends out hundreds of copies. There's a debate about whether it's 400, 600, or 800 someday. I'm sure we'll discover exactly what number it is. But he sent it out to all the top scientists and top leaders in the world at that time. And the only person he heard back from was Nikola Tesla, which said, lock up what you have here for 1,000 years until mankind is ready. So that speaks to you about the power of what was here. And so there are actually letters in the archives of where Nikola Tesla and even Einstein have communicated with Walter Russell for supporting his Mark Twain Memorial. And one of the letters that we ran across was where Walter Russell was writing a letter to someone else and said, hey, I sure wish Einstein, if he was going to use some of my stuff, would have given me credit. And so that was a great debate among many of the men back then. And in fact, we heard straight from Leo that she said that when Einstein passed away, they did find a copy of the Universal One in the desk of Einstein.
There we go. So this is going to take us, this is when Kimberly invited me to the museum. She actually did a workshop. And we had to go sit in different places and sort of meditate for a bit. And I invite all of you to go look at this box. And out of this square little box, you will see infinity. And that was really kind of an awe for me. And so we're going to explore the box and the meaning behind it, because it's actually quite profound. And it is, go ahead.
Well, and what's interesting is, please understand, as I was driving, what I did is I came back to the museum and I said, I will come and work for you 1 week a month, every single month for the next 18 months to 2 years. And that is what will be my gift. And so every month I drove 6 hours from South Carolina in an act of love to figure out how I could support this particular organization. Thank you, a lot of love, a lot of love. Poured a lot of love. And I literally fell in love. I don't know how to describe to you that when I would drive there, it would be like my heart was waiting to see this enormous amount of love. And so it has been my honor, my distinct honor, to be a part of this work and to see everyone who's been preserving the legacy, one that we hope to invite you into as well. But the reason I bring this up is because I had people like Karen, and I had people who had never heard of science. I had people who were very deep into science. And how do you bring those people from systems into that location and have them have a 3-day experience? And the whole time that I was in that museum, meditating, bringing down inspiration, what they would call illumination, light, a little bit of light at a time, is I kept hearing creation is child's play. Creation is child's play. And I really want to bring that home, because that's when I realized that the effervescence of how I was able to have people get excited was that at a soul level, we understand this work. Let it not be intimidating to you. And so when I saw someone like Karen take this box and go into a corner, it was incredibly powerful to see the magic that emerged.
It's not easy being in a corner. Okay, look, then what I got through this was you're looking through the fabric of space, you're looking at the mirrors in time. And in Walter Russell's work, he always talked about the cube, and I never quite figured out the cube. Until one day I was doing graphics and I saw this image, and I watched it spin. There's the cube, and what is that cube doing? It's going into the phi. And all of a sudden, I'm interviewing John Bosco, and what I saw with the cube is, again, you see those particles spinning. And you go, oh, I get it. It's the particles spinning. It's rearranging. It's points of light. And then you realize as we spin, and he talked about the crystalline structure, behind this you'll see the E8 theory that's on top, but it's all making the crystalline structure. And it is how the universe is working. And then what you see is we're nothing but points of light coming out of the matrix, and that's how things work. Okay, stop with this one for a second. This is where we're going to go to the threes. So when you saw it this morning, you saw Steve Ross. Steve gifted me the picture of the atoms. You see they arrange in threes. What do the waters do? They arrange in tetrahedron structures. What does light do? It's tetrahedron structures. So what you're seeing in that recycling system is the law of triangles moving through the vortexes, spinning and giving you angles of incident, no matter what you do. So you can continue. That's where you're going to see it's all one, all moving, all triangular, all spinning through time and space. And I want to show you this one, and this is Don Estey's work. But what he did is he took the whole Platonic solid, mapped them out, and you could see from there, and these Platonic solids as points of light are generating again that holographic field, that algorithm. So keep going. And so I just wanted to show you, again, everything is points and parts and particles of light. And we all try to make all these things so complicated. And I've been gifted by doing the magazine that I do to bring all of these different things together. You can hold this one for a second. This one, James Sorensen, where are you? See here? If James is around, James, back here, and you go to his table. He's worked with Ito Cow, who's done the structure of the atom called SAM. And when I met him at the Electric Universe Conference and interviewed him, everything starts with threes. They cluster in threes. They build in threes. And when they get chaotic, they go out of balance. You get chaos, it goes back into order. And that's how things in the system in our periodic table evolve. So I would say go see James back there. He's got a table, and he can explain it to you more. But it all builds the Platonic solids as well. So you can see the entire building block. Yeah, go for it. So here's what we think is time. Again, a prism. We're looking at an hourglass. We're looking at particles arranging. You're looking at pictures of Walter Russell, where you can see the vortex, but it also creates, and then hold, it also creates your DNA. We are antennas that way, and the prisms of light collect the geometry of which our whole systems read. So you can go forward. So I like it when I can make things move, because you can see it kind of driving itself through the pinch point, and exactly how the DNA goes. So Don Estes one time said to me, water is made of hydrogen and oxygen. And he goes, does it not carry the full range of octaves? So what I have there is you can see even the chemistry within the water. And Randy, who's here, who's got a vortexing water device you'll see with the big glass, basically said this, because water has 440,000 individual panels in one molecule. It is the most programmable substance on the planet, a liquid crystal. That goes back to Pollux. And the reason I put Pollux work there is because Jerry said to me, those panels are crystalline. They are a crystalline matrix. The fourth base of water is all part of that. So what is water? Water is the medium of which everything is imprinted. That's why your body is 99.9% water. That's why your brain is 90% water, because it's like the system. It's the system that you're processing in. So even when you have a dis-ease, what is it doing? Why do you have so much water in your brain? You have to reprogram it. You can't keep doing the same thing and think you're going to heal, because it's water. It's retaining your memory, your thoughts, and everything else. So this was kind of fun for me, because Walter also said we're woven of 7,000 points of light. And so when you see that, you can see the carbon structure coming down. And then I got squaring the circle, and those circles again are made with the geometry of the phi ratio. So then you begin to see the unfolding of man and life and everything. And this goes back to Walter Russell's, when he says it's a carbon lattice. Go back one.
You want me to go backwards?
That's okay.
Okay, sorry.
One forward. That's okay. It's all good. The carbon is like, how do you go back to the squaring in the circle? And then when you look at the Wikipedia, and you see how the lattice builds, you can see the fourth phase of water, you can see how it circulates, and we are carbon-based. So then you begin to realize that a crystalline lattice can be described as a three-dimensional arrangement of atoms and molecules in a crystalline lattice. And that's why we're receivers. We are basically a living hologram ourselves, receiving and putting out energy. That's why these points of light that she talks about, we're not separate.
Well, and we're moving towards a time, please understand, that we actually, when we talk about this holographic universe, when I've been talking about systems thinking, I've been calling a holographic leadership. The technology already exists where holographs will become a regular part of our life. There will be a day when these 2D variations of screens are non-existent for us, because this is not the way our brain works, which is why it's so powerful to see these different concepts overlaid with each other until we get there.
So you just think of it this way, we're coming through time and space, we're arranging ourselves as particles, we're basically digital art, and we are made of points of light. So I'm just doing some of these images. So the concept of a crystalline lattice is fundamental to the study of material science, chemistry, and physics, providing the framework understanding the solid state matter.
And when we pull some of these things together for you to think about, please understand that there is a depth of understanding for all of you. You obviously are experts in your field. What we are trying to have us think about this, though, is the fact that this whole universe is, in fact, of countless parts wired together by an electric flux of nerves, which inform each part of the universe of ever-changing condition of every other part. Now, part of the power of hearing it from Karen's perspective, because I found her work incredibly inspiring, is that the feminine tends to have a very strong perspective and ability to integrate things. So with the masculine tends to see things in parts. This is part of why we're needed to come in together, because these are two very different perspectives of the universe. So when we think about this electric flux of nerves, not only do we have light that's connecting between each of us. For me, early on, I didn't understand how I was actually seeing like if every individual had like a battery. You know how you look at your iPhone or your phones or your iPads and you see how much battery you have? Well, for many of us, we can actually, and some of you are having your gifts come online now, you can begin to see what your battery charge is of yourself and other individuals, because what we're about is charging that battery so that we have more light coming in to assist with the next level of humanity.
So the one I want to show you here is two ants actually communicating with a pulse of light. And that's how you can actually visualize that. You can hold for 1 second. I had the privilege of doing a magazine. I had this thing on hair, and it was all had to do with how in the old times they actually put two trees together in World War II, transmitted stuff, and I thought there must be something with hair. And I went back to the code breakers, I went back to Sodom and Gomorrah, I went back to all these things. I found this gentleman, he was 80 years old, he had done so much research. And I'm going to show you one more after this of his, but I have an 80-page magazine that is all shocking. It'll even show you what happens when you get drunk. It is so fun. So again, when we think of the pulsing, think about how it happens between the sun and the earth. And down below, you'll see it, how it pulses between the top of your brain down your whole neural network. That's a way of understanding it. And then when I think of this, think of it from the micro to the macro. Sometimes we don't even remember that so many of the images, we say they aren't connected. How can they not be connected? That is the outer space, that is water, and that's your brain. There is a fundamental design in that is so brilliant, and it transfers information all the way through micro to macro from you to it. And you can see these pulsing lights functioning on all these different levels. Okay, this is a strand of hair receiving communications. So you can see the wave function happening, and you can see the dendritical structures literally moving with it. That's fascinating to me, because that's one strand of hair. Can you imagine what's happening? I won't say that to Steve Ross, because he doesn't have any. He burned it out, but that's okay. So now we're going to go back to the box because it actually explains some of the things that Walter Russell kind of saw, but maybe didn't quite. And I'm going to put it together for you. So we'll go the next one. So when you look at his diagrams, what I've done is given you an idea of how these actually move. Now go back 1 second. And the reason I want to show you, because there was really nothing new under the sun. You can see the ancient traditions had the same understanding, and that's the energy flow. So we can go to the next. It's always fun to put the visuals because it really helps me. And then I saw this, it's like the Merkaba body, and that's a box moving in time and space. And again, how do we square off with light? As above, so below, so within. So this one was also looking at how the wave functions, from the ancient traditions of India to his drawings and how they fluctuated. This shows you the wave. Just hold on to this one for a second. And I want you to see on that box, you'll see, we always look at something one-dimensionally. I want you to look at the side. Imagine what it's doing, and down below, now we're getting, what do they call it? Angles of incidence, or incidence of angles, or whatever it is. And then you can see his drawing of the coming and the going, and how the wave, you can measure it in every angle, like we have Phil over here who described all those numbers. That's okay, so keep going. The next one was fun. So this one, don't let it go past this one. I want you to notice on these diagrams, you're going to see the magnetic field. You're going to see the moving in the lens of light. And the other thing you're going to see is that pulsing sound system. And that pulsing sound system is when we look at the sound universe pulsing, you'll see that, see the sound pulse? That's where you can see that it's a sound system. So when you're looking at the ants and stuff, we are literally dynamic beings pulsing our energy to one another. It's a way of understanding that. This is one of his drawings, and I thought, okay, why don't I overlay it? And all of a sudden, I could see it moving. I could see that it was dimensional. I could see that it had many lenses, and it moves circularly. It just moves all around. And then, like Marco Rodin's, hold on to this one a second, that's the black, what we call the black hole. I have a question for Michael Claridge on that one after that. I think that is that like the Birkeland current where it goes in? I don't know, that was my thought. So this is like the optical lens, that's the black hole where it sucks in the light, and then you can see, that's the way your eye works. It sucks in the light. And so he's trying to tell you this is your universe. This is you seeing, you witnessing. So his diagram here on the lenses goes back to his work as well as Marco Rodin's work, where you actually see the angles actually being measured. Hold on. And then you see that the prism, everything is a prism of light. And when he had a diagram, which is this one, the 3 mirrors of the cosmic mind. So that you have the magnetic parts of, the left brain, the right brain, and the center, which most would call it the pineal gland. And how is it that those 3 mirrors, of which we are bringing in information, are processed through our cosmic mind? So how does light begin then to create humanity? How do we see it? It reflects an image. And you can see the bands of rays coming, and we process it through a field. And this is our holographic field. We are putting putting particles together in our mind's eye. How else do we see this? We think it's solid, but really all it is pixels, just like the TV screen presents pixels. We are basically bit players, is what I call it, in the big grand scheme of life. And the one thing Walter Russell wanted to say about this is we live in an electric age, and we live in an electric universe. And that was something that him and Tesla both agreed on profoundly. And so when you look at the way we've mirrored everything, all the technology, we've mirrored our own inner bodies outward, showing us, revealing what it is, the technology that's within.
Well, and this is very important because of where we're at. I've heard many references over this past day and a half about this idea of what's happening with 5G, what's happening with this frequency band. Most average individuals do not understand the issue of the wave. And so this is one of the favorite books. It's called In the Wave Lies the Secret of Creation. And it's got a lot of the scientific illustrations there in this book. And when I started to bring people into the museum, I began to realize how few people actually understood the power of of the wave. This is important to all of you here with your new inventions and your new technologies, because if people don't understand the power of the wave, they're not always going to understand what some of you are trying to do. And so even all the way back to the things that we have, the technology, it's not the technology is bad, it's that it's collectively building a frequency fence. And before iPhones and all of those things, it was back in hearing aids and many other ways that many of you know signals were interfering with what's happening. So it's imperative that we begin to find ways to make this more common knowledge.
All right. So I just wanted, let's go back to what a hologram is, just so you understand. So the hologram, if you look it up, it says it's a pattern produced on a photosensitive medium. And that medium, there's only one thing it could be if there's only three things that make everything, and that's water. And water and ether, if you actually look how it's spelled, they're not that different. And in the Bible, it said it divided the waters from the waters. So therein lies where the energy gets collected, rebirth, reborn, whatever. The next one, the hologram as a technique, is the ability of a wavefront to be recorded and later reconstructed. Where? It's in your mind's eye. So that's what we've done. That's another thing that we've done. The photo, then photographically developed, imprinted into your mind and stored as information. So we are basically a storage bank.
We are.
Yeah, just to say this is kind of like that. You can go. Yeah, you can go. Okay. Okay. This is just to remind you now, when you look at the prisms, we're looking at the fractal nature of our reality. And it is a kaleidoscope. And if you look at the picture down before, that's a 13th century picture of them showing you the geometric, you can go, geometric nature. But this is the fractal nature of our reality. It shows you from the triangle that we have the building blocks of life. And in the wave is creation. So hold on to this one. This one is the creator is undivided light. That's why they say creation is light, and I am one. But we, as a bandwidth here, are the divided light. So think of it that way. We come from source, it's the white light, and we are the bandwidth of the electromagnetic spectrum that we are woven from. Okay? So, you know, a lot of this takes you back to understanding. So here's the picture. It says, in the wave lies the secret of creation. And I'll show you how that happens. And so when we look at this, we see the weave, we see the web. It's an electric wave in motion, projecting aspects of self and angular lights. We are a resource of source. So when we look at the dividing that they're trying to create among us people, it's crazy. We are human. We literally hue. We are color range of lights. And so I'll let you read that one.
Man may weave the pattern of his self and light of me, and of his image and divided light of me, in as the sun sets up its bow of many hues from divided light of me. So one of the first books that he wrote right after that illumination was called The Divine Iliad. And so I want you to imagine that you've been through a multiple day illumination. And illumination to them is when the light spectrum opens so large that you actually receive a download, an understanding of the greater sense of things. But we as humans are very linear. We like to look at things, the cow jumped over the moon. This kind of divine light coming in and information coming in is like receiving the War and Peace in an instant. What do you do? How do you begin to unpack that? And so one of his first attempts was to actually write down this book called The Divine Iliad. It's more of the philosophical and spiritual side of the work, because he said that we needed to make sure that we had understanding that love was the center of all things when it comes to science. Mm-hmm.
So here's one thing. So why does color heal? Because we are made of compressed light, so we respond to light. So that's, you know, if you go back to Steve Ross and go look at that Denshaw machine, you'll understand it, and he can give you a really good thing. And our back is Krishna Madhapa, and with his GDV device, that's the P, and that's what you're eating. You literally eat light. And when we exchange energy, go back, no, you're good. It's okay. When we exchange energy, we think it's just us and back, and it's just us, but it isn't. On the next image, with his GDV...
Let me pause for here just a minute.
Yeah,
so I want to add something here, because this is something that I really learned bringing people into the works at the museum, is our ability to increase in consciousness cannot outwit our physical vessel's ability to handle the light. And so for many of you that have been working towards your steps of where you're receiving more illuminations, you're receiving more inspired thought, it's very important that your physical body keeps up with that. So you will find as you're moving towards that. Many of you have already made the choices. I was talking with some of you of the purified water, of more fresh vegetables, of more green, because what we're doing is we're literally consuming light. And I watched as people would come into that Russell Museum, go through the programs, and some that were having physical problems had a big, very difficult time of assimilating the energy that was coming up.
Okay. So we're going to have to speed through a little bit here. Okay. So I just wanted you to see that you actually eat light, and that's courtesy of Krishna and who's monitoring. And the next image you're going to see is the difference between a plant in your place, loved or unloved. And that is amazing. And there's Krishna with his, and that picture of the purple is the emanation of a tulip. We not only do that, we drink light. And so we drink light, we eat light.
Pretty much that's light. So when we have the Awaken Your Inner Genius booth on the other room, please understand, if you'll come visit, what we've done is that the Russells actually created a home study course. It's 12 units of this kind of a pamphlet. And their original idea was to be able to help people increase their level of consciousness so they could change humanity. That was the gift that they gave us. And so for the first time, it's been printed with the new color images here in the home study course, looking a lot about like what Michael was talking about yesterday, and very, very powerful. And so the idea was you would do 1 unit a month, and at the end of a year, your consciousness would raise to the level that when you did it again, more and more illuminations and insight would come to you. So there's a lot more to say, but
No, we can keep going. We have like 10.
All right.
We've got, because this is important. This is where, when you look at Walter Russell's work and what they had with their toy that I held on to, this is talking about how Walter Russell's makes how your periodic table is made. It's made by compression and expansion, and you're going to see that that relates to wavelength, that relates to color, and to the sound system. And I want you to see that the coiling and uncoiling. And then this is how the elements are made, through expansion and contraction. That's why you get coal to diamonds. And here he wanted basically to show you that gas are solids going outbound, or the gases are, some are coming in and some are going, I'm just going to go fast for the moment, just so you can get it. Here is this right here. When I saw the square, one day I was seeing that, and all of a sudden I saw his periodic table come right out of the box. So you can play that one, Kimberly. And that is amazing, that when you see from the box and the mirror of life, everything comes from that. And that was stunning to me. I love it when I see these things, when I find them. It's like, I don't look for them. Sometimes they just show up. And I was like, oh, that's how that periodic table unwinds out of the square.
2 minutes.
Yeah, okay. So this one?
So please understand that in 1927, Walter Russell went to the Westinghouse laboratory and did an experiment where he transmuted water into 17 different elements. It blew them away. They had no frame of reference of understanding that. So I was when we heard the other day about this issue of transmutation showing up in a government grant, he was talking about this all this time ago. In 1941, he was awarded the doctorate of science from the American Academy of Sciences. So there is something there that's very pure, and I believe it's been saved as a treasure. And the reason Karen and I are here is because the whole movement, I think, as we need to wrap up to give our next guest time, is that the genuine belief of what Walter Leo believed was that there is a genius inside of everyone. Every single person has the ability to be a genius that can transform the world. And so I'd like you to really, really hone in on this as we're wrapping this up, because this is incredibly powerful. Having worked with so many people, I see that people are often walking through the world as the walking dead. I see them always begin to think that they're small and they can't necessarily change the world and influence. And when I saw the potential of what this work did, and I saw people walk in and say, wow, if I can figure out how to connect with this larger source, the universal one, in a way that can actually awaken my inner genius, can you imagine how we can transform the world together?